She was always just a pawn in her father's game, and one day he tried to sell her like a last coin. Colt, his friend, was ready to buy the girl in silence and take her away forever, like a voiceless thing. But Jacob, a silent cowboy with a broken past, stood by her side without asking the world's permission. But just listen to the shocking twist this drama took, and why justice in the end prevailed. In western Arizona, where dust hung in the air like smoke over a forgotten fire, folks in the town of Sand Falls knew not to get into debt with Baxter Tate. An old card shark, drunk, and gambler, he had long lost everything but his daughter. But as it turned out, he considered even her something that could be put on the line. Her name was Ellie, 17 years old, slender as a spring shoot, with eyes that had long forgotten how to expect kindness. She rarely went into town. Those who did meet her at the well or in the general store said she was like a shadow, silent, quick, like someone afraid to leave a trace. That evening, it all began with a hoarse laugh from behind the doors of Saloon Alma, when Baxter had lost a poker hand for the 5th time in a row. His hands trembled, his shirt clung to his back, his face was sweating like a runaway thief's. And across from him sat Evan Colt, a local traveling cattleman, known not only for his wealth, but also for conducting business in a way even a jackal wouldn't. Colt, smiling, taking a sip of whiskey. "You have nothing left to bet, Tate, except your girl, perhaps. Heard she's like a shadow in your house. Let me have a look. Maybe she's worth it." At first, everyone thought it was a joke, but Baxter didn't laugh. He took the deck, slowly shuffled, and said, "Baxter. One more hand. If I lose, Ellie's yours." People around them froze. A cowboy by the door cursed under his breath. Someone in the corner stood up, but stopped. The air was too thick. It was too dangerous to interfere. He lost. The next morning, Colt's wagon was already outside the Tate's house. Ellie stood on the porch, not understanding what was happening. She knew her father drank, that he shouted, that he sometimes threw plates at her. But to do this, Baxter, without looking, "Go. You have a different master now." She didn't move, only her lips trembled. Then Colt himself got down from the wagon, walked over, and grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away, but it was too late. She was thrown onto the wagon like a sack of coal. Baxter stood, not looking up. Colt sat beside her and cracked the reins. They were seen as they drove through the center of Sand Falls. Ellie sat with her head bowed. Dust swirled behind the wheels and the whispers in the crowd grew louder. But no one came forward. No one dared. Except for one. At the blacksmith's gate stood a man, tall in a dusty hat with a hammer in his hand. His name was Jacob Marsh. Taciturn, reclusive, he lived alone on the edge of town. No one knew him well, but those who had seen him in action said he wasn't one to turn away from injustice. He watched them for a long time, and when the wagon disappeared over the horizon, he cast off his apron and slowly walked towards his horse. In Colt's house, where dogs once lived, now stood Ellie. He threw her address and said, "Colt, if you stay quiet, you'll live. Open your mouth and I'll pass you around like a cheap card in the saloon." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just pressed herself against the wall and breathed, as if she were being suffocated from the inside. Colt left, slamming the door. Evening was falling outside and the house grew darker. Ellie sat in the corner and closed her eyes. And at that moment, footsteps were heard outside the window. Quiet, heavy, confident. The door creaked slightly, and then someone said, "Jacob O.S. This place is no longer her home." Ellie flinched when she heard the voice. She sat in the shadows, huddled in a corner, not daring to even breathe. The door slowly opened, and a silhouette appeared in the doorway. A tall man in dusty clothes with the shadow of a hat on his face. His hands were calloused, rough but not threatening. He didn't rush, he simply stood and watched. "Jacob," quietly, "don't be afraid, I'm not taking you, I'm giving you back." Ellie didn't answer. She only shrank back further, like a frightened animal cornered. The man took a step, then another. Finally, he squatted down at arm's length. "Jacob. My name is Jacob Marsh. I saw them take you away. It was wrong." He spoke slowly, directly, without unnecessary words. Ellie, whispering, "I don't know who you are, but if he finds out you came..." "Jacob," Scuffleman nodding. "He will find out, but that doesn't change the fact that I came." They left before dawn. Ellie followed him, asking no questions. Jacob knew a shortcut through the rocky ravine where none of Colt's riders would venture. By midday, they were at his cabin, small, sturdy, with a cool cellar and a well nearby. Jacob before some, it's safe here. Ellie sat by the wall. Her hands still trembled, but her gaze no longer darted about. Jacob's calmness seemed to transfer to her. He didn't ask questions, didn't ask what had happened to her. He just placed food in front of her and went to his workshop. And for the first time in a long time, she ate, but the town wasn't sleeping. 2 days later, Colt raised a ruckus in the saloon, said his share had been stolen, that it was kidnapping. He threatened, if she wasn't returned, the town would smell of smoke. And he had the means. 3 armed mercenaries, a stable hand with a rifle, and people who feared him more than the sheriff. Colt, eternity, growling, raising his mug. She belongs to me. I want her fair and square. An old man at the bar dropped his glass. Sheriff Price, standing by the entrance, hands on his hips. Women aren't cards, Evan. What you did, that's no deal. That's a sin. Colt. I don't care what you call it. Bring her back, or I'll come myself. And he left. But before that, his eyes met the sheriff's, and everyone in the saloon understood. This wasn't over yet. On the outskirts of Sand Falls, Jacob sharpened a knife. Not for attack, for defense. He knew they would come for him. He lived alone, unused to strangers. But now life breathed in his home, a life he wasn't going to give up for any stakes. In the evening, Ellie approached him. She stood silently for a long time, then said, Ellie, why you? He looked at her. Jacob, because no one else stood up. And because you're worth more than cards, Elle. Her eyes filled with tears. But she turned away, not letting them roll down her cheek. Ellie, Seaman, what if he still comes? Jacob, then let him come. They came on the 3rd evening. Colt, 2 of his men, and a convoy with torches. Smoke trailed on the road. Someone in town locked their doors. Someone watched from behind shutters. Colt stopped at Jacob's house. Colt. See, shouting. Give her back. This is my last warning. No answer. Colt. We'll start burning from the porch if you don't come out. He raised a torch. But at that moment, Jacob came out from behind the house. Alone. Unarmed. Only in a cloak, behind which a simple hammer was visible. Jacob, if you want to take her, you'll have to go through me. Colt, smiling. Thought so. 1 against 4? Tribune. Not one. The door behind him creaked open slightly. Sheriff Price emerged. Behind him, 3 men from the blacksmith shop. One was wounded in the war, another, a widower, the third, just a farmer. But in their hands they held rifles, pitchforks, torches. Not against Ellie, against Colt. Sheriff Price, she is a free woman, and if you claim she's yours again, we'll find a way to teach you the law. Colt froze. His men exchanged glances, and without saying a word, they began to back away. That same night by the hearth, Ellie laughed for the first time, quietly as if she herself couldn't believe she could. Jacob poured her tea. She looked at him for a long time and said, Ellie, what if I don't want to go back to that house? Jacob, then you don't have to. Ellie, what if I want to stay, not as a debt, but as a wife? He was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. Jacob, then I won't ask twice. After Colt's shameful retreat, everything seemed to quiet down. But Ellie knew. The storm was just biding its time. She had been living with Jacob for a week now. In the mornings, she helped at the well. In the evenings, she sat with him by the hearth, sometimes remaining silent for hours on end. Jacob didn't rush her. He was present but didn't push. Trust is a slow thing. But even in peace, her heart didn't release its fear. Especially after one of the boys crept up to the house and yelled from under the fence, "Boyos, they'll still take you here." He said you're his property. Jacob came out without a word and simply stood, looking at the boy. The boy ran away, but the mark on Ellie's soul remained. Property. That word had haunted her since the yard of her childhood home. Sheriff Price came a day later. He brought papers. Sheriff Price. To Jacob, I can't officially protect you until he has charges. Alas, Ellie is considered of age, and that contract, no matter how dirty you consider it, it's still signed. Jacob, angrily, a contract by which a living person was sold? Where were you when he signed it? Sheriff lowered his eyes. Sheriff Price, I was there, Jacob. But Ellie didn't scream. Which means by law, she agreed. I'm not proud of it, but the paper exists. Jacob. What if she says no now? Sheriff Price. Then she'll have to prove she didn't say yes. Ellie stood behind the wall and heard everything. The next day, she disappeared. Jacob woke up. The house was empty. A plate of bread on the table, the blanket neatly folded. Only her dress hung on a nail, the one she wore when he first saw her in the wagon. He searched the entire slope, went to the river, looked in the barn, returned to the house, and only then noticed a word was chalked on the fence. A wee. He found her 2 days later, in town, in the back alley of a brothel. Ellie sat on a crate, knees pulled to her chest. There was a bruise on her cheek. Her dress was torn, her eyes empty. Jacob. Ellie. She flinched but didn't raise her head. Ellie. Go away, Jacob. Jacob. What are you doing here? Ellie. I came back. I'm my father's debt. I'm Colt's debt. I'm a debt to everyone but myself. Jacob. That's a lie. Ellie. It's a truth you can't change. He knelt before her. Jacob. What if I say you are not a debt? You are a person. You are a woman who can choose? She didn't answer. Only a tear fell onto his hand. Colt came out of the doors a minute later, smiling. Colt. Ah, there you are. Came to get your due? Too late. She's mine again now. Jacob. Amy. Standing up. Number now she belongs to herself. Colt. Not by paper, not by law. Jacob. Then we changed the laws. And they went to the sheriff. Right in the middle of the street, Ellie stepped forward. Loudly, so the whole town could hear. Ellie. I renounced the contract. I was forced. Signed against my will. My father gambled me away. Colt bought me. But I am a human, not merchandise. And I want to be free. The crowd was silent. And then someone clapped. Then a second. Then the whole town. The sheriff approached. Sheriff Price. Buenas noches. The girl stated it aloud. With witnesses. That's enough to nullify the agreement. At least in this county. If Colt insists, we'll go to court. Colt stepped forward, but now 3 men blocked his path. One of them, a former gambler from whom Colt had taken his home. The second, a teacher who was humiliated for his kindness. The third, just a blacksmith. Colt understood. He was no longer in charge here. He spat on the ground, cursed, but left. In the evening, Ellie sat by the hearth again. Ellie, Ifiyun. I thought if I came back, everything would be the same. But something burned inside. Jacob. And now, Ellie, now I want to build something of my own. Maybe not right away, but next to someone who doesn't consider me a stake. Jacob smiled unhurriedly. Jacob. I have a hammer, a couple of boards, and a lot of time. Ellie. And I have hands that are no longer afraid to tremble. He extended his palm to her. She took it. Colt didn't leave forever. He just went into hiding. And all that time he wrote letters, made arrangements, called, persuaded. And when he realized that the town was no longer on his side, he went another way, a dirty way. A week after Ellie's public refusal and the sheriff's support, a guest arrived at Jacob's house. Tall, stooped, with graying temples and greasy hands. Her father, throwing at Ellie from the doorway. You ruined everything. He almost gave me land for you. All it took was to wait a little. Ellie, and I do why no money. Quietly, you gambled me away, Papa. You put my life on the line like a coin, and you lost. Father, you know how much I invested in you? You're my stake. I raised you, fed you, and now you're just sitting here with this silent wimp? You think he'll pull you out? Jacob stood up. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, Jacob, she is no longer property, and you are no one to decide for her. Her father pulled out a paper. On it was his signature. And Ellie's signature, trembling, old, almost faded. Friday were contract for the transfer of guardianship and obligations, signed before her coming of age, which means, by law, she's mine. If you don't give her willingly, I'm going to court. He turned and left, but not alone. Now he was with Colt's lawyer. Everything was tangled again. The trial was set for 3 days later. Rumors swirled in town. Someone began to whisper again. That Jacob had made a wife out of a girl who was sold, that it was all strange, that maybe the father really had the right. Ellie was silent, but on the third evening she stood up, went outside, stood before the church door, and spoke aloud, so the whole town could hear. Eloise, I am no longer afraid. I am not anyone's property. I am a woman whom no one protected when she cried out. But now I speak. I will no longer be silent. Not before my father, not before his friend Colt, not before those who watch and remain silent. The old preacher was the first to approach, stood beside her, then the blacksmith's wife, then the sheriff himself. On the day of the trial, half the town sat on the benches in front of the building. Colt didn't come. He knew he had lost. And the father sat, sweating, his eyes darting across faces. The judge opened the session. Shut your ears. The girl stated that the signature was made under duress, that a transfer for money took place, that blackmail occurred. He looked up. Judge, do you, Mr. Garvey, have documents proving otherwise? Her father was silent. He just breathed heavily and suddenly stood up. Father was shouting. Just take her. Just don't interfere in my business. Jacob. Calmly. That's no longer your business. That's her life. Later, as Ellie left the building, a boy approached her. The same one who had shouted about property. One on Mar, lowering his head. Excuse me, miss. I didn't know. I just heard others talking. Ellie knelt beside him. Ellie, the important thing is that you know now, and that you won't repeat it. The boy nodded and ran off. In the evening, Jacob stood at the edge of the field, building a new corral. Ellie walked up and silently hugged him from behind. His hands rested on hers. Ellie, is Watson, whispering, I don't know who to be. I've never lived for myself. Jacob, answering. Then start with something simple. Be the one who chooses. Ellie, what if I choose you? Jacob, then I'll be there, always. 2 years passed. Jacob built a house with windows facing the sunrise. Ellie wrote letters to girls living in similar hells to hers. In these letters, she wrote a simple phrase. You are not property. Even if the whole world says otherwise, there's someone who will hear if you say, I don't agree. And in town, no one called her a debt or a stake anymore. They called her Ellie Carey, a woman who chose freedom and love.